sum of all regulations in our industry leads to that more or less the small car industry has vanished inside of 5 years. BMW sells well over 600,000 cars in China. This is more than all Chinese car manufacturers sell in Europe. So we still have a very strong market position. Will it stay that way? I don't know.
Hey, just quick information before we start into the video. I'm just editing this video in my hotel room right after the session ended. This was a panel session and a discussion between BMW CEO and Siemens CEO. There was a lot of really interesting insights regarding Europe's competitiveness, the role of regulations, and what do these players expect from European Union. Let's find out.
Regulations is going the wrong way. And there are two regulations where this is the case currently. The first one is the so-called combustion engine ban, because there's a bet on one technology that this supplies the complete market, 100%. In Europe, that's about 30 million cars per day. And of course, that technology, one technology is depending on specific raw materials, specific competencies, which are not fully scaled up in Europe. So you make a political bet. And we have to explain policymakers that there is a political risk in doing so. So that's the first one. That's why we always were quite vocal in technology openness, which more or less stays, we can bring down CO2 in a much better, faster, and competitive way. That's all we said. The second thing I would say, the sum of all regulations in our industry leads to that more or less the small car industry has vanished inside of 5 years. Inside of 5 years, look at the new car business, almost no small cars anymore. And that's not because customers don't want to buy that. This is the sum of regulation, which is the same for all cars, makes small cars too expensive. And that is our task, to pinpoint, to say there is a flaw in the overall regulation. I could continue with that. On the other hand, it's our task of competitiveness is mainly our task, to put the puzzle in a way that we can still have a business. So you have to do two things. You have to be an entrepreneur, to put all your puzzles together and create a business model. And the other thing, of course, you have to speak up when something is going wrong. In my experience, if you have a good argument, policymakers do listen. Maybe not right away, but they do listen, because competitiveness is a political issue. It's not only an economical issue.
Maybe one thing to add, what I always think about is maybe you should redefine it. They should not regulate, but set guardrails. So what do you want to achieve? Carbon neutrality. Okay, so that's maybe a carbon price or two, and that goes up and up as we go, and then let technology evolve. You set a guardrail, it's directing you where you want to be, and let technology play it out. Because otherwise we're ending up in that problem that everybody is buying the latest technology before this one ends, and then everybody has to buy the new one. So you're creating an over-demand and under-demand, and then you reverse it, like the heat pumps. This is not going to work.
A follow-up question. I mean, this is not a regulation that's brand new. It's been a policy for a couple of years. Did everybody, maybe including you, underestimate the consequences of it? Or was this taken in a situation where the crisis was not as severe on the continent?
I think we have always been very outspoken, even when it was decided that this is not a very good strategy. So we are very clean on what we said. We have not changed our position. And by the way, we are growing fast with electromobility. We're growing every year. So we do everything to bring down CO2. And that is what I mean, that as an entrepreneur, you should never follow policies because you want to follow policies. Competitiveness is your task, and you have to explain how that is achieved. And I think looking back, some market players recognize that to be faster than policymakers is maybe not a good idea.
When we look at competitiveness, I think we have to see how the regions in the world compete, and I think it's fair to say on European automakers there's pressure from both sides, from China, and also on the policy level from the US. I would like to have you elaborate on what is the bigger challenge currently? Is it the tariff situation? I mean, you are a little bit ambiguous probably because you have a big production in the US as well, but still it's something that disadvantages Europe in a way. And then obviously we come to China on the next point.
I recognize there's a difference between a global player and a regional player. Of course, a regional player is always more hit by tariffs because you're depending on that. If you're a global player and import and export at the same time, you kind of level it out. So we are the largest exporter of cars from the United States into the rest of the world, specifically Europe, and at the same time, we import about the same volume from Europe into the United States. So when Europe reduces their tariffs, we are profiting. If the United States increase there, we are hurt. So when we are netting it, the sum is almost zero. So, and I think policymakers have to recognize that there are large global players sitting in Europe. They have an advantage of being global. But policymakers, of course, look at Europe. They only look at Europe and not looking at global business models like Siemens, like Mercedes, like BMW have. And there are dozens of them. And I think there is a new way of looking at it. They're not, most global players sit in Europe. They're connected to the United States and China at the same time. The other way around is not so often. I think we have to look what is happening, and that's no risk, that's an opportunity. And to be a system integrator which employs global supply chains, make very super complex products, that's a recipe of Europe. To have the ability to do that, we should never give that up.
Well, how do you look at the negotiation style and the result of Europe when it came to the tariff debates with the US administration?
I mean, number one is we don't like that. We believe in a world in a free trade world which has as less tariffs as possible in order to let the offerings flow across, which would stimulate competitiveness, higher growth, less inflation, and the outcome is a little bit disappointing. At the same time, we don't have a leverage. We neither have the unique market capacity which we have in Europe. We're talking about one market. We don't have it. We cannot leverage it. Nor do we have we still have a dependency on defense. So therefore, I mean, what shall we do? I mean, Chancellor said it this morning. He says he doesn't like the result either, but it was somehow a way of not escalating it any further and just seal it. Hopefully it's sealed by now. I mean, we're starting discussing again. That's not good, but maybe that's the best what you could do so far in that situation. We have to talk more about how can we strengthen ourselves, Europe, as one market, as being as innovative as possible, innovating faster than the others. So our products will still be demanded in other markets. That's our tasks. That's our play. It has been, and we have to defend this business model in the future.
I sometimes wonder, when I look at the results of the negotiations on tariffs, if an escalation couldn't be the better strategy if you achieve that it's also an escalation on the other side. And doesn't Europe make itself a little weaker than it is when it says, okay, well, we accept that you take tariffs, but we go back to zero? Wouldn't there have been a chance to achieve something better when you make yourself a little stronger, believe a bit more in yourself, and try to negotiate more by maybe even accepting an escalation in the first place? You mentioned Chancellor Merz. When he wasn't the Chancellor before, he said he was going to do exactly that when Trump would impose tariffs.
I think in trade negotiations, which are always extremely controversial, there are many different interests in there. We must acknowledge the only solution which reduces the least harm is a compromise. Of course, we can be tough, but there's always retaliation. And if you're globally connected, you maybe don't want that retaliation. What we see, for example, the highest tariffs which are imposed on BMW are not the Americans. This is Brussels. No, we have a joint venture in China producing electric minis. We pay 30.7% import tariffs from China over here. We're a European company. You know, is that fair? No, of course it's not fair. But still, we accept it for now as a compromise in trade negotiations. The point I want to make again is, if you are globally connected, you must be very careful to pinpoint your strength on one point. You might get a backlash on the other side. On the moment, when the import tariffs were introduced, almost on the day, the start on rare earth from China started. Of course, you can play strong man, then you get feedback. And let's not look at the globe, the size of the United States and the size of China and the size of Europe, then you know the answer. We have a small spot on this globe. And at the same time, we are highly connected, which is an advantage we should use.
You agree on this strategy?
Yeah, I fully agree. We actually, to be very honest, we don't have the leverage. What shall we do? I mean, there's so many dependencies also. Again, look at the situation which we have in Europe, the war in Ukraine and so on. So therefore, I mean, maybe that's the best outcome so far. But we have to work on how can we maintain our strengths or even increase it in a world which is transforming. And currently, in that point in time, in a world which is more and more deconnecting, which goes more bipolar, we are on the weakest spot because we are depending on these huge markets, both sides. The largest market for us, for you, is United States and China, in whatever sequence. And therefore, that's the situation. Our technology is still demanded from outside, so we have to concentrate ourselves and bring us in a position where we do have a better leverage. That's the task. So we are very often and too much looking into the West and the right rather than talking about us. How can we be stronger in the future?
Let's have a look at the other challenge, to call it like this, China. I mean, China has gone quite away from being a great market to being still a good market, but not as great anymore, to now being interested in and even already entering the European market and becoming a competitor maybe on the home turf. How do you see the competition with China, particularly in that very moment where sort of everybody is waiting until we finally see those Chinese cars on the street, which we don't do now?
Just to look at some figures. BMW sells well over 600,000 cars in China, one company. This is more than all Chinese car manufacturers sell in Europe. So we still have a very strong market position. Will it stay that way? I don't know, but this is the case currently. Of course, we fight with innovation to stabilize that. But let's look at the figures. We are inside of China much bigger than Chinese are in Europe. Are we able to prevent the Chinese automotive players like Japanese and Koreans to play some role in here? I think we should not. We should trust that we are competitive. It's not easy to survive in the most complex car market in the world. Super regulated, super complex, super demanding customers. It's not so easy. And to keep them out, the result will be they keep them out of their markets. They will keep us out of their markets. That's not a good deal. This is a very bad deal. So we should be careful not to look the world from only a European context. If BMW would sell only products in Europe, we would halve the size of our company immediately. And that is a risk. I would never take that back. I would never take that back.
It doesn't surprise me, to be very honest. What was the operating model of the world? The world, everything what you want to manufacture with lower costs, bring to China. That worked for a while. Labor arbitrage. Meanwhile, China was getting richer. Then it's developed to a market, not only a manufacturing hub for the world, but also for a market. Because people were buying, what did they buy? Cars. So it eventually developed one of the largest car market in the world. And along with that, and since you start manufacturing, you localize, so you're bringing, in that context, technology to the Chinese market. It's given. So, and it's needless to say that local players start adapting technology, learn technology, and what they're good at is adapting it, modifying extremely fast. They have their own way of innovating. Our engineers, they try to make it completely perfect the first time. They have maybe 3 or 4 iterations. both works. Disruptive is maybe the way how we do, incremental is what they do. But meanwhile, I mean, we have now a competition which has grown over the time for good reasons. And now we have to see, number one, best thing is stay ahead. Also try to defend your market share in China with your local products. It's a super innovative market. If you're not competing there and not able to compete there, you might have a problem globally as well. And try to leverage also your own capacities which you have. So nothing bad. In turn, we will see now not only cars coming to Germany, but maybe also battery manufacturing sites. China is definitely 5 to 10 years ahead of maybe most of others, except some Asians. And maybe they bring their manufacturing sites to Germany and we start grabbing battery technology reverse.
Start copying their technology.
Absolutely, not copying, but we are learning. I mean, knowledge comes on 2 feet, and if you get more and more people here and manufacture stuff, we have the machines, the Chinese machines. Okay, we start learning. So that's a global world. Hopefully, it stays global, and hopefully, we do have dependencies because dependencies is also something good. But this is the way how I look at it, and same here. I mean, our market share. I mean, every third manufacturing line in the world is automated by a Siemens automation. And our market share in China is definitely very, very high. Yes, we have local players, and we have to take them in the market as well.
I'm trying to imagine the German engineer going into a Chinese battery factory and taking pictures and trying to rebuild the same in Germany. So why not?
Or maybe hire somebody who worked for a Chinese company. And we have a lot of them, by the way. And we love our Chinese engineers too.
When we talk about the competition in both fields of both regions of the world, I think we do, in the next moment, have to think about new markets. We have to think about opportunities that we see maybe in Latin America or in other Asian countries. Where do you see the highest, best opportunities for the next couple of years? Look at some specifics.
Currently, the biggest growth, believe it or not, we have in Europe. The second biggest growth market is the United States, even after the tariffs, which are since 6 months in line. Then rest of world, the sum of hundreds of markets. China is the most difficult market, but it's still the biggest one. You know, you have to put everything into relation, and that is stabilizing now. So I think it's not that you cannot exchange one market against the other if you have 180 markets overall. And believe it or not, where the most people live are the biggest market, that's the United States, China, Southeast Asia, and South America. That's where you have to go.
I mean, same you here, if you take the market increment for the next 5 years, so which is a multiplier by size and growth, then you see, I mean, number one is United States, followed by China. The gap is actually widening. China used to grow faster, they're slowing down and they're still a little bit smaller in size. And then, I mean, Europe might be there as well, but there's again, these are more than one market, unfortunately. But if you talk about new ones, I would definitely look into India. India is picking up more high-tech technology as we speak. India is doing a great job in investing in infrastructure. Is it mobility, energy, communication infrastructure? And there's a market evolving, which has also dedicated demand. So there might be also an opportunity or a challenge to go with local product development. But and the middle class is also increasing. It means the private or the local consumption is increasing at the same time. But then you can go to ASEAN markets and others. So, but I would add India definitely as well in ASEAN.
India is the new China.
It's hard. I mean, in which KPI? Amount of people, yes. If they come to a GDP per capita comparable, that is years to go. In terms of what you find in terms of technology, it's still different. If you look at the fine print, in the way of how their GDP is composed, it's also different. So it's not the new China, but it will be a part of the whole economic equation, which you will recognize. Either now, you recognize it already, or anytime soon.
do you think about India? Do you see it as a point where BMW would, go strongly into the market, seeing the potential of it?
Let's have a look. India is a sum of almost 30 sub-countries, so it's not as united as you think in terms of regulation and so on. That's what you have to recognize. So it's quite complex. The second thing is it has the highest growth rate, and in terms of GDP, 5, 6, 7%. So this is one of the fastest growing regions in the world. But the base is so much lower. You cannot only look at growth, you must also look at the base. And it's far away from the development we've seen in China in the last 20 years. But, of course, in percentage, it's one of the highest growth markets. And we invested heavily in software companies where we have a joint venture. So things we do here in Germany also depends on the companies in India. And slowly, we also grow the premium car market. But it's a completely different size than we have in China. So it's about the size of, it's only 1/20th of the size of China, much smaller.
Maybe also one thought on Mercosur and the potential for you once Mercosur is really in place and Latin America becomes more accessible for European products. Where do you see the potential here?
I mean, same maybe for India. If you take our market for our technology, it's not the biggest in size, but it's an opportunity. It will evolve as we speak. I mean, you have certain industries like food and beverage, which is a very strong industry as ours, which are serving huge opportunities, electrification, and so on. But the most important point for me would be coming back to your first question. If you're living in a world where you have two superpowers which are somehow squeezing you one way or the other, how smart would it be to make as many free trade agreements as possible and as fast as possible in order to really open up your markets? Therefore, I fully support that, and maybe there's appetite for more. Why not about another one for APEC or India or India?
Thank you so much, Oliver Zipse. Thank you, Roland Busch. I think we haven't been pessimistic. I think we do believe in opportunities that we see on the European level. I think we do have, particularly you two, have some expectations to what Ursula von der Leyen maybe is saying and doing. Thank you very much so far. If you want to, short commercial block, hear and read more about what we do at Politico, here are some QR codes that I recommend you to scan. This is the podcast and the newsletter and the pro newsletter. I'm sure you have subscribed already, otherwise I'm going to flip the chairs to the other side. Thank you so much, thank you for listening, and thank you for joining the panel.